I think the Australian summer is sort of when you might expect that sort of rough weather on the Great Barrier Reef. But I guess for anyone that's not too familiar with our weather, the trip we're doing being in July, we're in Australian winter. And I think that's when we expect the weather to be quite calm. We would be out of cyclone season, right?
Outside of cyclone season, what we do get from around late May until around September are the southeasterly prevailing winds. So it's a cooler wind, of course, coming from the south. And one of the good things about where we conduct the Minke Whale trip is that, so on the drive up, it takes about 16, 17 hours. It's generally following sea coming from the southeast. So it's kind of pushing behind us. Then once we're up there, there are a couple of prime spots that we go to that are a bit more exposed and it can be pretty choppy. But let's say the anchorages and then some of the spots that we might dive along the reef, we're fairly well protected. Anchorages are usually fairly kind.
Yeah, it's not too shabby on the way out, is it? It's on the way back coming into that wind. It can be a little bit of a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
But that's after you've had all the fun anyway, so.
Yeah, and the thing with it is that during that time of year where it is our dry season. So, beyond the wind, I would normally describe them as being generally clear, sunny days, blue skies, that sort of thing. You get really lovely sunsets on the Minke trips, sort of sitting over the land. You normally get the sunset just coming, it looks like it's west, but it's sort of slightly to the south of Lizard Island. So you kind of get this really nice silhouette effect of the islands that are up there as well. So it's really, really pretty, but it's just that wind and the chop that it generates that can be a bit of a battle for some people. But once you're in the water, you kind of forget most of that.
Well, I've got to kind of jump in on that one as well, because it leads in quite nicely to the MV Argo herself. Having been on the water for many a year and many boats now, highly regard the Argo as pretty schmick machine when it comes to dealing with any kind of conditions. She's certainly made for ocean going rather than being close to the shoreline and hiding out of a 2-knot wind.
Yeah, I bet it's pretty rough conditions in that thing. And look, like any boat, once it gets to a certain point, it's going to start rolling around. It's a boat that I really enjoy going to sea on and working on.
Yeah, I mean, she's done a lot of research work as well, hasn't she? And there's a reason for that, because she's robust and does a really good job of getting you out there and doing it well.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned we're going up to the Ribbon Reefs. The itinerary that we're on, I understand that we have a number of sites where we'd moor up waiting for the Minke Whales, and they're separate to the dive sites. So could you kind of try and paint a little picture on that kind of arena?
So when I guess sort of starting from the first morning, let's say we've left Cairns the previous evening, we've been driving through the night. Normally, people are starting to get out of their beds 6, 7 in the morning, whatever it is. At that stage, we're usually maybe 2 to 3 hours away from getting to, let's say, the Minke zone. But when I say the crew, and we certainly encourage the guests as well, that we're already looking around outside the windows and everything. And it's not uncommon to already see Minke Whales popping up around the boat while we're still driving towards the actual area that we're headed to. At that stage, normally if we do see whales, we're not really in a location where it would be ideal to stop the boat, get out and go for a swim with them, just for sort of a safety and comfort, reason. So we can hold our nerve, enjoy breakfast, and maybe get the first 2 or 3 cups of coffee under our belts. We've just got a little bit further to go. And, we're sort of trying to get up there and if we can, is basically try and get whales straight away. Because once you've got whales early, if you can on that first day, it really sets the rest of the trip up. So classically, hotspots have been around a couple of dive sites. There's Lighthouse Bommy, there's 2 towers, there's another one. But, from the years that we've been going up there, and I mean, a lot of it's by luck that you go, hey, let's just go and have a look over here as well. It might not necessarily be near somewhere where historically you would expect to see them. And, you're just kind of looking around and the surface watch is really important. People looking off into the distance, trying to see if they can see them. And it's quite a funny one that it's not uncommon that you see them off in the distance. If you just kind of hang out, you'll sort of over the next few minutes, you'll actually see as the whales are porpoising actually coming towards the boat. And so you're trying to do everything at that stage to really keep a close eye on what they might be doing, possibly set the boat up. Maybe if you're not near a dive site or a mooring, you might go to a drift, which is something else that's really cool that we get to do. So drifting with the whales is, for me, has probably been the better way to experience the whales over the years. But let's say if we haven't seen whales and we can get onto one of the spots, such as Lighthouse Bommy or Two Towers, we'd pick up the mooring, and instead of setting up like we typically would for a dive, which would be with the stern facing the dive site, we put the nose into the wind, so the stern will actually be facing away from the reef at that stage. And we basically just sort of tie up and throw people in the water, throw the lines in, and just see if, and as it has been in the past, if that's going to be enough to try and encourage the whales to come in to see us. Because if they are close by and where they do tend to hang around some of these areas, the only encouragement they need is for us to get in the water. Still a wild animal. So, I mean, as much as you'd like to say, yeah, they're here because of us, it's probably be a little bit of a stretch. But what I would certainly say is, just from watching them for quite a long time now, that there seems to be enough of a curiosity in them that, let's say, if we weren't there, that perhaps there wouldn't be the interest. They might be off doing other things, because we don't even really know what they're doing here. They're not feeding. They're not. Well, I think they've been seen mating only a couple of times, but they're not really courting. The calves, if there are any, if we're lucky enough to see one, the calves are normally 3 months old, maybe 4 months old, so they're not coming here to calve as far as we know. So their actual presence is still a mystery. Yeah. And I guess, without sort of making it sound like we don't know what we're doing, I mean, when we get up there, like we are sort of using past experience as a way of trying to tilt the odds in our favor of seeing them as quick as we can. And then from there, I mean, you just try to see how you go. But once you've got whales, easily the best thing you can do is stay with them. And it might sound like a really strange thing to say, but over the years, and I've been fortunate enough that I've had interactions with 15, 16 whales at a time. It's not common.
Wow.
When you get the people that come along and they've read or they know someone that's been fortunate enough to have one of those encounters, immediately believe that that's what it's always going to be like. And, like it's some sort of whale version of a sardine run. It's not. You'll get people saying, oh, should we go somewhere else? Maybe we should go and look over there. And it's like, well, this could be going a lot worse. We've got whales here. Like, you stay with the whales. And even if they, maybe they disappear for, 10 minutes or something, quite often people will be like, oh, okay, well, they've gone. Everyone gets out of the water. At that stage, I get straight back in. Again, this idea being that, the thing that might generate their interest or curiosity is just that there are people in the water. So I guess, people have kind of had enough. The whales have gone. We haven't seen them for a while. We'll pull the ropes in and then we start talking about, okay, well, maybe we're on a dive site. We can reposition the boat, do a dive here. And again, it can happen at Lighthouse where it is quite exposed. The chop can be pretty full on and the current can be quite hard. So it might be, well, look, we could have to dive this tomorrow morning when the conditions might be better. We'll get the right tide. But for now, let's trundle a mile south and go and tuck in behind one of the really cool dive sites that are along the inner edge of the reef. And we'll go and dive there.
Yeah.
So we're fortunate in that.
How far north do we go?
It's roughly 100 miles.
I mean, like dive site wise, I mean, do we go as far as the cod hole or is it about not necessary?
Look, the cod hole's a long way to go. And it's like, if you're wanting to go there, the difficulty then is that you're pretty much going to lose a day.
Yeah.
Because it takes 2 hours or so to get there from the southern end where the whales are. Do your dive, and it's almost like, well, you've made the effort to get up there, you might as well do 2 dives. And then you're going to turn around and go back. So you've now used probably 7 hours. So in terms of something being a minke whale trip, this is why, we've always said to all the other groups that have come on and with the trips that I do as well, there is the temptation, like it's just there, or, Lizard Island looks really close, but Lizard Island is 2.5 hours away from where we are. Yeah. So it's, hey, look, if we're here for whales, like let's invest, and just stay here and
make the most.
Yeah. and you never know when you could be 2 minutes away from whales showing up somewhere and having the most amazing interaction of your life. So it's always sort of that excitement that it's about to happen.
And I think, Martin, given the fact that this sort of opportunity to swim with those whales, right, as far as I know, is the only place where it's, dependably happening on the planet. There are other places where you can find, I don't know if it's the exact same species of the minke whales, but, you go from a boat, you take pictures from the top, but swimming with them, that's the only place. I think if there are some of our guests, crossing half the planet to do that, they would definitely want to spend as much time as they can in the whales. And I'm wanting to say as well, if someone was coming from far away, Europe, the US or wherever, and they also want to spend a lot of time on the Great Barrier Reef doing regular scuba diving, they might as well stick another trip before this one or just right after as a combination. Because we're going to do some scuba dives, but I think the three of us agree that the focus is going to be the minke whales interactions as much as possible.
It has to be, mate. I mean, you can combine it as much as possible, but it's got to be within reason, If we're going to go there for these interactions that are only found in that one location to this extent, then why would you go and dive when it's going off?
When you get up there on that first morning and you tie up and, people are in the water waiting and you're on the surface keeping lookout and you're keeping an eye for the whales. When you see that first whale of the season just under the surface, just sort of 100 meters out, but making its way towards the people on the surface, the feeling doesn't change year to year. And then even to the end of that season, if you've been having great whales all season, you get to that last day and I'm never there going, it's been a good, I don't need to get in again. And then you just see, it's like, well, I don't know if I would be doing this next year, or it might be the last time that I ever swim with these whales. So even if it's just for 10, 15 minutes, that's okay. I'm getting it.
Yeah.
It's just something to be really treasured. I think I think it's amazing.
And that's the big kicker here as well, isn't it? It's you're witnessing it with your own eyes, but you're actually experiencing being in that environment. You're no longer the 10 or 12-year-old kid that's watching it on Sir David Attenborough on TV talking about it. You're living that experience and it never dies. And I think between the three of us, we've got a stupid amount of dives and experience with a multitude of animals in the ocean, but there'll be very few that we've forgotten about.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I think it's
exciting.
Hey, Nico, we'll come back to the boat in a bit, but let's talk photography a little bit because obviously these so-called dwarves aren't exactly small, are they?
Yeah, I think, they're dwarf minke whales, but when an animal is, 7 to 8 meters in length, you definitely want to take a wide angle lens with you. So, I mean, we'll be doing a little bit of reef diving as well, but I encourage anyone coming, for those at least shooting a interchangeable lens camera, bring a wide angle lens. I was going to say your traditional zoom, your full frame equivalents for those speaking that language, your 16 to 35 or something like that in terms of zoom range is okay for one dwarf minke whales. But Martin was telling us of experiences where he's had, quite a few coming together. And then that's definitely a fisheye lens that you want if you want to try and include a few minke whales on your photo. So yeah, I would encourage you to pick a fisheye lens as a priority. If you don't have it, a regular rectilinear wide angle lens is fine as well. For those of you who are shooting a compact camera like a TG6, TG7, that sort of gear, I really encourage you to get a wide angle lens that you can, clip in from, one of those wide lenses, just for you to get, a wider zoom range, 120 degrees, 130 degrees. You need at least that to get, clear photos of those animals. And if you're coming with an action cam like your GoPro, your Insta360 or, your DJI action camera, they're pretty wide from the get-go. But again, you can get more image quality by sticking a converter in front. So I'll definitely invite you to do that. For the minkies, you don't really have to use strobes. And actually, Martin, I don't even know if there's, I wasn't sure if there's any regulation around using strobes for a minke photography.
You're not allowed to use strobes or video lights.
Okay. So that clears it. Anyways, we'll be close to the surface. I'll be there to give you some tips to complement Martin's briefing before we jump in. But essentially, you're not using strobes. You're only going to use the ample sunlight we'll get. As Martin was saying, it's mostly a time of the year where we expect clear skies. So there will be lots of ambient light. The only thing you'd have to be aware of and conscious about is the position of that light of the sun in relation to the whale. So, if the whale is in front of the sun, you're going to get some silhouettes and, some dark shadows that, we can work together after you've taken them on recovering those shadows. But I would invite you to try your best to position yourself so that the sun is in your back and then all that sunlight, bang, is lighting up the Minkies. So yeah, maybe a little bit on where I'm so excited about doing this trip. It's going to be a lot of fun, but a little bit on what maybe I'll be doing there. So, like Martin said, and as you can guess, he's got tons of experience getting the right interactions with the Minkies. I'm here to help you get the most of the opportunities from a photography standpoint. So you can essentially grab me anytime I'm on the boat and I don't have my housing open, checking an O-ring. That's the only time I'll be a little bit focused on myself. But other than that, grab me for any question you have on underwater photography for the Minkies or for, the reef dives we'll be doing. It's fine as well. Happy to talk about this. And, show me your photos if you're not sure on how to. If you're very proud of a photo, I'd love to see it as well. If you're like, I'm not too sure. How can I improve? How can I do better for the next interaction? Come and talk to me. I will have tips to give you. And then when you're editing your photo, I'm also happy to help. If you're not too sure how to make the image pop a bit more, I'm happy to help you do some edits as well. Sometimes the photo as it comes straight away from the camera can look a little bit disappointing. But, if you've captured enough data in the sensor, then sometimes it's all you need to make the image pop afterwards. So I'll be happy to help. And although I'm most familiar in terms of camera housings with Nauticam, as the t-shirt says, I'd be happy to help, troubleshoot any technical issue you get with your photography gear while you're there. So if you might have a housing or a camera that I'm not 100% familiar with, but bring the manual with you if you have them. And if you've got any issue, any trouble, any headache, come to me. I'd be happy to do my best and help solve it as well.
Martin, just picking up on what Nico was saying there about the wide angle and getting the sunlight and the right direction, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's important that we do need to point out some of the codes of conduct that Queensland government have put out, or the Marine Park have put out about the swims with the Minkies. So could you explain the two ropes or the guideline systems that are in place for these interactions?
So under the code of practice for swimming with the Minke Whales, which is, I don't know, maybe you've got a copy you're sending out to people that are booking or interested, but it's pretty easy to find. Certainly a good location is on the Minke Whale Project website. There is a bit of detail, but, it's not too heavy, but the main one's ready for us so that, let's say, once we stop at a spot, let's say we go to lighthouse bombing, we tie up. Best case scenario is that whales are 10 meters away from the boat. However, in that situation, we can't get them under the water yet. We have to wait for the whales to be, a little bit further away. We can then put the ropes in, we can enter the water. And once the ropes are in the water, we have it set up so that we've got these rubber, they're actually tire inner tubes from bicycles. We've got those threaded through the rope so that, especially for the photographers trying to manage their camera and more so in tropic conditions, you can thread your arm and you're basically capturing the rubber loop in the crook of your elbow while you still manage your camera with two hands. So those rubber loops are handy, not just for that management, but also for the fact that it's a fairly obvious visual prompt as to how we should be trying to space ourselves out along the line. So if, when I prepare these lines at the start of the season, it doesn't take long, but you're aiming for about sort of 3 to 4 meters space if you can. One thing I have to be mindful of is I don't put a loop too close to the boat. Otherwise, the whales might not be as interested in getting so close to the boat. Or the other one, in tropic conditions, you'll be getting quite a lot of the snap as the boat, moves up and down with the line. So there's that, so we're trying to, keep it to a certain number of people on the line under the permit, which is a bit different to the code of practice as such. So the permit is the thing that actually lets you swim with the whales. And that's an endorsement that you get from the government on top of a permit that you already have to go and conduct activities in the reef itself. So the Minke Whale endorsement is something which is separate. In fact, these permits, as far as I know, there's still only 9 in existence across all of the operators on the Great Barrier Reef. So the fact that we have access to one is really amazing. And they don't create new ones. So the 9 that we've got, That's more than likely going to be the night that we ever have. So we're, expected to limit it to 12 people in the water at once. So that really helps as well avoid sort of that overcrowding on the lines. And also potentially, for the whales, reducing the number of variables in their mind. What are these things up to? And, there's so many of them, they might get a bit overwhelmed and less likely to come in close. So that may be one of the reasons why let's say the larger day boats that go out to the reef from Port Douglas or Cairns that have, let's say smaller ones might have 50 or 60 people and the bigger ones have over 400. They can get whales from time to time, but certainly interactions are nothing like what we get on the Ribbon Reefs.
400?
The ones that go to the pontoons, they take, 440 people.
Wow. That's crazy.
Mm.
So when we're talking about the unique element of this trip only having 12 guests, 12 versus 400, that's insane.
Yeah. So
I would hate to be that chap that's sat there in the water with a minke interaction and the dinner bell goes that says, get out the water because it's someone else's turn. I'd be gutted.
So there's that. And then beyond that, the fact that, with the ropes, it's, we shouldn't let go of them. We can't swim down to the whales. We can't swim off away from the ropes. If there's a rope that there's no one on it, we have to pull the rope in. So that's why I was saying before that, let's say everyone's got out and we have to pull both ropes in. I'll at least put one line in and I'll go and get on it. And I'll just float there until people start getting back in, or, we decide that, hey, look, we've had a good interaction or we've given it a good shot here. Let's move on and go somewhere else. And, that can be a time when you make a decision, and probably not on the first day, you wouldn't be perhaps resigned to the fact that, well, we're not going to get whales and we'll go for a dive. But, in saying that, it could be, let's say it's sort of 2:33 in the afternoon and people are starting to think, well, look, we tried to get whales. We haven't had any yet. Tomorrow's another day. We could move south, go and pick up at one of the dive sites, do an afternoon dive, and then we could stay at that dive site and do a night dive as well. So you probably remember fairly well a couple of the night dives that we did. We'd probably be looking at going there. So great dive during the day, and then nighttime,
Mate, look, I mean, you mentioned pulling lines in that are empty. Well, I can guarantee you they're not going to be empty because there's either going to be me or Nico on the end of them all the time. So you better get down the gym and get used to pulling this weight through the water. The only other time that you're going to get me back in from being on the line will be saying night dive. And I do not say that ever. I'm not a night dive fan, but that night dive or those night dives we do up there, they're just insane.
I remember seeing a video from our common friend, I think Pete Maggi, dating 1 or 2 years ago. He was on one of those trips and he posted a video of the night dive, which was so full on. I remember seeing the reef sharks feeding, swimming around. And, we were talking, Matt, you said about, that's a night dive you don't want to miss. I'm going to say from a photographer's standpoint, that's a night dive where I would highly, highly recommend that you don't switch back to a macro lens. You would want to get a wide angle lens to capture a bit of that action. And on an equipment standpoint, right? So we're clear that for the Minkies, we're not using any strobes or video lights, but I would recommend that people, if you have, those strobes or video lights, preferably strobes for photography, bring them for night dives and for any reef dives that we're going to be, because there are lovely reefs there, lots of fish life, and you do want to use that artificial light to make the most of it. But yeah, really looking forward to those night dives as well.
Mate, the reason I'm laughing is because, well, Martin laughed at the same time as well, is that we were up there to do the coral spawning. So we jumped in at nighttime to record, the coral doing its thing and spawning. And I'd been provided by Macro Mode a couple of really strong video lights. And it didn't take too long after turning them on to find that every diver in the water was just sat behind me watching the movie go off because you couldn't see the coral spawn. And for the amount of white tips that were belting through and trying to catch everything that came through a beam of light, it was just ballistically good. And I was trying to find the recordings that I made, but unfortunately, they're on one of my hard drives that's having a bit of a brain fart at the moment and won't open up. So fingers crossed I might get it, and then I can post a short little snippet of it. But it's just, I've never seen anything like it in the world. It's fantastic. just to touch on what Nico was picking up on when we mentioned the other operators that have, up to 400 guests. That's the boats shipping them out to the pontoons that are close to Cairns and Port Douglas. However, there are other operators that go up into the region of the Ribbon Reefs like we're talking about. But I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Martin, I don't think there's any other boats that only take 12 guests, is there?
No, not as far as I know. You might see, some private boats, like some charter boats. However, they're not going to have access to Minke Whale permits. So, you might see them up there at Anchorage just because they're going somewhere, or, they might be diving in the area, but beyond the Minke Whale permit, the other side of it is that Argo is part of a syndicate, which was formed quite a long time ago. And essentially what that syndicate does is they have an agreement with each other regarding the use of certain moorings along the Great Barrier Reef, but primarily from, along the length of the Ribbon Reefs, and then, Cod Hole, Lizard Island, that sort of thing. So if you're not part of that syndicate, then you don't have access to the use of those moorings.
Yeah.
So that's quite another crucial thing that Argo has. It's another arrow in its quiver.
Yeah. So with our 12, and it's one of the major highlights of the trip is that we've got, other than when we're moving, obviously, because you don't want to be jumping in when a boat's all right, see ya. But when we're static and the lines are out, there is no restrictions whatsoever on the duration of the time that the customers are in the water.
No, it's as long as everyone's wanting to be in the water and there's no reason that it was unsafe for us to do it. I mean, it's we're not certainly pulling people out of the water. I mean, definitely not when there are whales around. But it might be that, again, sort of going back to that point that if we've been trying for whales and we're sort of starting to think about, well, do we want to spend another hour doing this and then maybe not have the possibility to go and do something else like a dive somewhere, then sort of, for you guys figuring out what your guests would want to do and then sort of seeing what our thoughts were. And I would probably say, and again, because I do my own trips as well, it's, you have to be fluid to a point. Like I said before, right at the start, with the whales, you have to invest, and the investment you're making really is time. But if you think you've given it a really good shot and, let's say you don't feel like you're going to get more whales that day, or, whatever reason it's not happening, it's like, okay, guys, there's something that we know we can do, and we can move the boat down that way 20 minutes and we can go to a really awesome dive. So, So, we're trying to advise you guys as best we can. And I guess the thing there is, apart from the fact that we know each other, the advice we're trying to give the groups that come out there are purely with the aim of giving people the best possible experience. And as much as we might want to see more whales, I mean, we never know when they'll show up or where they'll show up. But if everyone's happy, we've always got something else we can do. And that's another really cool thing about these trips.
And that's really why Matt and myself were so excited to do this trip with you on Argo, is that ability to focus really the goal being clear to our guests or to anyone that's thinking of joining us. We picked this boat because we really want to make the most of the whales interaction. At some point, like Martin, you said, we might all be content with the interaction we've had on that day and really want to try one of the dive sites. But we're putting the focus on the Minkies interactions. Unlike some of the other boats that you might, fantastic operators that you might book with as well, but who may have a bit more guests. And what we were saying before is if they go over that 12 people limit, they will have to rotate people through the rights to be in the water. So, some will be lucky, some might not be too lucky and have as much space time with the whales, which, can create a bit of frustration. And also some of the boats where they might guarantee more dives in the water. For us, we're thinking, and Martin, maybe you can talk a bit more about how many dives you typically have seen people doing on those trips. But the boats will tell you, we guarantee you're going to spend 3 or 4 dives a day in the water. That means that there's no magic, right? They're going to have to say, hey, we stop on the Minkies interaction because now it's the time when we promised you we're going to do a scuba dive. And that's not what we're doing. So if you really want to make the most of the trip to spend time with Minkies, we're really thinking likewise, and that's why we've put this trip together.
yeah, like, there are the other boats that go up there with the scheduled trips, and they will swim with the whales. It's still more of a diving trip with some whales, or, I mean, sometimes if the whales are really good, they'll spend a lot of time with them, but there's still, a lot more of a focus on working to a schedule based on the dive sites and where people would be expecting to dive at certain times of the day or certain dive locations. Whereas, say we just know we're in an area where we're expecting to see the whales, and if it's not working, we can go and dive, without too much hassle. So it's, it's fluid enough. And I guess the other side of that, without sort of knowing sort of the finer details of your schedule, but one that works really well that we've used on the trips that have included diving, are the ones where, let's say we have the 3 days up at the northern end of the ribbons where we have the whale, we expect to see the whales. And then on the second to last night, we make our way down to ribbon number 5. There's a really cool dive site down there, we go to. So we are sort of starting to move away from the focus of the whales. However, it's happened a couple of times when we've been doing this. And then when actually on that same day, we've then gone and dived somewhere that Matt's been called Steve's Bommy, is we've come up, we've exited the water after this stunning dive. And then before we've taken our gear off, there's 2 or 3 minke whales surfacing at the back of the boat. So you never know. So when we do that schedule, we know that generally we're guaranteed like 3 dives on that last day. If people wanted to go that way. Otherwise you can do the full 4 days of on-site action up at the reefs where you're probably going to have the whales. But this is what I mean. There's this flexibility to it. So let's say in that scenario where you dive on the last day, you do 3 dives, leave sort of mid to late afternoon around kind of 3:34 normally, because it's 14 hours, get back to Cairns from there. There's on the preceding 3 days, I guess the average over the years has probably worked out to somewhere around maybe 5 dives over those previous 3 days. So, anywhere sort of between, let's say 6 dives, and maybe 10. If the whales were really quiet, you might end up doing maybe a bit more than 10. But if you start getting up around 11, 12, 13 dives, it probably means the whales have been really quiet.
Yeah. So, and it's also worth pointing out as well that those dive sites that we hit, if there's people that are on the boat that are non-divers, they're still fabulous reefs for snorkeling and going exploring the beauty of the Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah. And probably the other one on that note is what can happen when, let's say we're somewhere like Lighthouse Bommy, where we're tied up, perhaps with the expectation of seeing whales, and you have got some non-diving guests, is we try not to split the activities too much. So let's say you could tie up and go, okay, the whales haven't shown up. For the divers, it's an opportunity to dive. But for the people that don't dive, we could certainly put a line in or a couple of lines if there's enough people, and they can hang on those lines and see if whales show up. Now, if we're underwater, we're diving, and then whales do arrive, it's not a problem for us. I mean, we can still stay there. However, what we generally do in that case is we would have briefed people already and say, hey, look, if we go on this dive, when we're coming back, if we see there are whales there, we'll keep an eye out. But to be honest, probably the best thing would be if you want to see these things is we think about finishing the dive and exiting the water, because, potentially the divers could be underneath the snorkelers. You're blowing your bubbles through them, so you're not really seeing too much. The whales, sometimes I've seen them and it's almost like they don't really know what to go and look at. It's like a kid in a candy store that there's too much to choose from. So, trying to guide the whale's attention, to one point. So let's say the people on the surface, where we usually get the best interactions. So there is that as well. And certainly when we've already got whales, we wouldn't put divers in because that could upset them, because I think what they enjoy, and I guess I think this way because of the fact that I've seen them a lot, is they enjoy the predictability of us hanging on these ropes. That they realize after a while that, hey, these things aren't going anywhere. They're not swimming down to us. They're not following us. They're not letting go of the rope. So the whale, in turn, is actually then in control of the interaction rather than us. So the whale kind of sets the boundaries, really, even though we have, let's say, our little rules that we have to stick to. And it's quite often the way you see a trip will evolve from the first day that, the whales will often start deeper. And people are like, oh, that they're so deep, I can't see them. And it's like, just give it time. You give it time. They'll start coming a bit shallower. And then they'll start getting closer to the surface, but staying a bit further away. And then you'll just sort of, with their successive passes, you'll see them getting in closer and closer until finally they're swimming through your legs almost and passing right in front of you, hovering in front of your face. And it's almost like you get some bold ones in the pod that are showing the others, hey, look, I did this last year and I know how this works. Watch me.
Yeah. It's like Nemo tapping his fin on the boat, isn't it? Just
yeah. So
when you think about it, it's some people listening to what we were saying now, might have done some baited dives, shot where you chum the water to get some shots or other animals, to help for interaction. But it's just amazing to think that with those whales, we are the bait. They because of everything you've explained, Martin, and the protocols we follow on just hanging onto those ropes, the predictability we give those whales, and they get that years after years. They're just comfortable, and because they're curious, they're just comfortable to go and look at us closer and closer if we keep quiet and do the right thing, which we will. That's just amazing. We are the bait, and they're just being curious. That's great.
Yeah, and it's a great example of how we should be interacting with any wildlife in the oceans. Give them space and time, and be patient, and you'll get the better photos out of it. If you're flailing around on the surface, then they're not going to come anywhere near you.
And another quick one with that actually is that when we are on the lines with the whales around, we should always try and maintain a horizontal position, not vertical. Again, that might create sort of enough motivation for the whales to stay a little bit further away from us, a little bit deeper. Another one as well is especially things like the 360 cameras or a GoPro on the end of a long pole. If we're holding that down towards them, again, that might be something that prevents them from approaching closely. So literally just what we've got within arm's length, and let the whales come to you. And that's also when you're going to get the better pictures. Number of photos I've got over the years, looking down on the top. I mean, a lot of them are intentional because we're using those as well for the whale identification, which is something we conduct during the trip as well.
Yep.
But what you really want are those really nice close-up ones where the whales are up at the same depth, up at the surface with us, and you're starting to get all the detail. You're seeing the pleats underneath. You're getting the ventral sides, the white from the darker colors on the backs. All of those details, and those kind of shots that I guess it's not quite the normal view that you might have of something, and it just kind of stands out that little bit more. That you might get a photo of something like a turtle shell, but what's really cool is if you see it from underneath and you get the patterns on its underside of its body. And it's the same with the whales. You're trying to hopefully capture something unique for you and, something that you'll remember.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, let's jump out of the water for a moment and come back onto the boat. We need to touch on a few elements. To start with, the food. Anyone who's never been on a liveaboard before or spent time on a boat whilst doing diving, snorkeling, swimming, do not be alarmed if you come away a few pounds heavier, especially on the Argo. The cooking is fabulous. And dare I say it, are the muffins and cookies still coming out from the kitchen?
They are. They are. Yeah. Yeah. It's, it's just that conveyor belt of food.
Yeah. It's a floating heaven when it comes to dietary requirements. Now the layout of the boat itself, a lot of people focus on cabins and their own personal comfort and sleeping area, etc., etc. I would hasten to add to that, you should focus on the cabin as the place you're going to sleep, and that's about it, because the communal area on Argo is very spacious, very comfortable, and will allow a lot of activities like post-photo workshops. We have 4 cabins, and they are all of the same configuration. So there's a double-sized bed and 2 singles. 2 of those cabins have en suites. 2 of them do not. They have shared bathrooms. And then there's 1 cabin at the rear, which is a twin cabin. That's from memory. You know, anything to add to that kind of description, Martin?
No, probably thing I guess to kind of reinforce what you just mentioned though is, I think one of the good things actually is that, you know, the cabins are comfortable places to sleep, and because of the layout, that it does actually encourage people to congregate in the common spaces. So the social aspect of the trips on Argo is, I think, something it's a real highlight for me. Yeah. The fact that at the meal times, you know, everyone sits at the same table.
Yeah.
You know, and so you get all the conversations going and everything else. You're not having to split people between, you know, little tables or booths, or I'm going to have to sit out here or whatever. You're all sitting down together at the same time. So you end up with a bit more of a, I don't know, like a kind of like a little team. It's sort of a social club, you know. It's, you've had this wonderful shared experience, and, you know, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's like the old aged family time. You know, you have your dinner and sit at the table and enjoy what's gone on through the day and discussing what you've experienced.
Yeah, and especially these are days where there will be lots happening, lots to share. I mean, you know, I can already, you know, prehend some of the conversations we're going to have. And just jumping on those, I love the boat for having the plants I've seen for all that open space where we can hang out in between or after dives, right? For the photography workshops that I've run face to face, this is one of the times, the evening, you know, and the between dives, which I usually guests really enjoy for the chance to, you know, chat photography, show images, ask questions, get feedback. I call that sometimes the office hours. I'll be doing heaps of office hours. So this will be myself sitting there with the laptop open. Again, I'm available for grabs anytime that the housing is not open, changing batteries. But yeah, you know, we'll be sitting there. I'd love to see everyone's photos and talk through the experience, the settings. You know, I plead guilty for being very nerdy, but that goes with photography as well. So it's part of the
I think one of the big indicators of when you're focused on your housing and cleaning, mate, is when you've got the headlight on. When that head torch goes on, just leave them alone for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I do use a head torch to check for, you know, any sand, anything that needs, or any piece of air that needs to be removed from those O-rings. Yeah. Hey, Martin, maybe we talked about the cabins and the lounge area. These days, I always want to recommend people not to leave the batteries in the cabin for charging, especially nowadays. More and more people will have lithium batteries involved, neither strobes, the camera potentially, or other things. So I think we've all agreed that we do want to see those charged in the common area where there will be someone always around if there was any, you know, an incident with the batteries.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about the layout where people with a camera might be dropping their gear and how that might work?
There's a good space which is out the back. It's actually it's a huge freezer, big chest freezer, and it's just got a big solid cover on the top of it and some carpet, like some marine carpet. So that's a good spot. I mean, you could easily have 2 people side by side, otherwise, you know, 3, or if you want to do it in a drier location, you know, you can obviously wipe the camera down, take it inside to the lounge. There's plenty of floor space in the lounge, so you're working down low with it, and there's no risk of the housing or the camera being, you know, knocked onto the floor or something. So there's that. Or the dining table during the day in between meals, you know, if you had something like a towel, put your towel down, lay everything out, you could open it up there as well. So, but again, with the low guest numbers, space isn't really much of an issue. Just quickly with those batteries, you're totally right. And aside from charging them in the common area, there's another place which is actually on the very upper level, just outside the wheelhouse. There's another charging point there. There's another large bench. Obviously, spare batteries make a big difference there. But you're not having to always worry about charging your battery, and, you know, even for things like the GoPros, and because those batteries are pretty good these days as well. So having a couple of spare GoPro batteries you can quickly chuck in, that helps.
And that's, I mean, I think the majority of charging can get done through the daytime. Now very quickly on the diving front, Martin, you're providing, or Scuba IQ is providing rental equipment for the trip if anyone needs to. And it got me thinking about when people are on the lines and waiting to have this experience with the Minkies. Do you always wear fins on the lines, or is it, yep. And obviously something like an OMS slipstream is going to be a little bit weighty for the surface, isn't it? So,
yeah. But I guess a thing I would just always say to people, if you have your own fins, yes, bring those, whatever's comfortable, whatever works for you. And because of the time of year and the water temperature, I guess people that would have their own gear would also have their own wetsuits. So if you're wearing something like 5 millimeters or thicker, there's probably going to be enough buoyancy in those suits that it's going to help keep your legs up anyway. But failing that, there can be sometimes some spare fins on board that are more snorkeling style, so that not as heavy. So if you need to do something else, there can be that opportunity sometimes.
Hey, we didn't touch on the water temperature actually.
By the way, I was trying to drive it just now.
What's the recommendations, brother?
I would say, look, if you're bringing your own suit, at least a 5 millimeter, depending on how much you feel the cold. Booties, again, I mean, from where you guys are, through sort of your channels down there, if you're capturing people from Sydney or the southern states, and they are divers already, there's a good chance that that's the sort of equipment that they have anyway. If you've got a 5 mil, maybe consider even something like shark skin, that kind of thing as well. It's especially with the whales that where you're just hanging on the line, there's no real activity to generate warmth.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had people in the water because the whales have been so good. We've checked them in, and then when they come and sign out, as soon as they exit, they think they've been in the water an hour and a half, and it's been nearly 6 hours. And they're purple.
Yeah. So we're not really talking 5 mil to protect against seriously cold water. We're talking about duration here.
Duration. Yeah.
Because what's the typical water temperature you'd expect around that time, Martin?
That time, I'd say we're probably going to be down around, and you're going to laugh, 22, 23. Because the last thing you want as well is, you go on these things and, say you've gotten a bit too cold in the first couple of days, and then you start, coming down with something, because of the water temperature.
Yeah. I'd say I'm probably one of the most sensitive to cold. I don't know about you, Martin, but more sensitive to cold than Matt here, that's for sure. So, I'll put it on front. I'll have an 8 millimeter wetsuit with me. That's probably overkill for many people, but I know I can spend hours in the water and not get cold. Yeah. I will wear a hood as well, because I reckon we're going to spend a lot of hours under the sun. Yeah. And you can see I don't have so much hair to protect my head anymore. Yeah, I think we're nearly on the same hairstyle. So I'll have a hood to keep me a bit warmer, because you can lose a lot of, warmth through the head as well. And it protects from sunburst too. So you don't want to be spending, a few hours with the Minkies and then be so cold you want to skip on a scuba dive or a snorkel experience if there's one late in the day. So yeah, whatever you feel comfortable. But for 22 degrees water, for me, it's going to be a thick wetsuit, or a 5 meters with something underneath.
Well, this is the beauty of having an open deck as well, because you're going to be able to get in and out at your leisure. So if you start to feel the nip, there's nothing wrong with getting out, having a warm up, and then jumping back in.
Okay.
And
because of, it's because of the way that the food is rolled out as well. Eating, you're going to want to anyway to keep your energy up, but that's also going to help you stay warmer. We encourage people to bring, water bottles. Hydration is going to help you stay warmer as well. So, generally what we would be saying to people is, at first time you get in the water, get in dressed in such a way that you think you won't get cold. And then if you go, okay, well, the shark skin or the hood was, a bit of overkill, I'm actually not too bad. You've got the flexibility to take that off. But the last thing you want is, you've got a dozen whales around you and you've got to get out because you're cracking your teeth because they're chattering so hard.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I would add in as well is that pre and post trip, obviously people are going to be coming into Cairns and maybe doing a night stop or a couple of nights, that kind of thing. And also Nico and I will be doing the same. So pre-trip, we'll closer to the time, we'll map out a bar stroke restaurant to meet up the night before the trip and embarkation day. And then maybe the same at the end of the trip as well, see how we're traveling. So it's the boat plus a little bit more just to add to the social factor.
Mm-hmm.
We've already got a few bookings, so if people are interested, get in touch now. If this hasn't tickled your fancy, then I don't know what will. Three boiled eggs leading the charge. I think we'll have a fabulous time, and fingers crossed we'll get some fabulous pictures under the watchful eye of Mr. Nauticam Mares there, Nicolas Remy.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be, a liveaboard dive trip that's not like others that you would have experienced. And I'm looking forward to this. And, help everyone on the boat with the camera, take great pictures that they can show around and, make sure you make the most of the interaction.
Certainly. Fantastic. Fellas, lovely to catch up with you. It's certainly a rare opportunity for the three of us to be on the same timeline and have available time at the same time. So thanks for giving me that time, actually. And for anyone who's listening to this and feeling like they want to jump on board, get in touch. We'll love to have you. Ciao for now.
Bye, guys.